I'm Max Brantley on Wednesday, September the 9th, with news headlines from Arkansas and around the world. Hillary Clinton, the Democratic presidential candidate, went on ABC last night in an extensive interview, said she'd made a mistake in setting up a separate email server to handle her email when she was Secretary of State. She was sorry for it. As a technical matter, I'm not sure the evidence yet exists that she needed to say she was sorry for anything. Others have done the same thing. There's no evidence that any wrong or damage to the U.S. has occurred for this. But as a political matter, she had to do it. Her approval numbers were dropping precipitously. Opponents are gaining ground on her. It's clearly been a useful tool by political opponents against her, so she said she was sorry. This worked wonders for Bill Clinton back after his first term as Arkansas governor when he was beaten by Frank White. He came back the next election, said he was sorry for his errors in judgment, and voters took him to heart for many years to come. Well, it worked for Hillary Clinton. It remains to be seen. She's not the politician that Bill Clinton is. There's no doubt about that, but nobody else is. In Fayetteville last night, happy news. City voters there approved by a 53 to 47% margin a city civil rights ordinance. It's a largely symbolic measure that extends some measure of protection to gay people in employment, housing, public accommodation. It had been fought strenuously by religious forces. They repealed a somewhat tougher ordinance last year. This time there was a 5 percentage point swing in how the voters went. I think the business community joining behind this ordinance was important. Perhaps people are just finally getting used to the idea that they need not be afraid of giving legal rights to all people, not just people who are just like them in all practices. Good news on the Democratic Party front this morning. A candidate for U.S. Senate has emerged. He's Eldridge, a former U.S. attorney, a young, bright, ambitious fella who's lived all over Arkansas. He has one particularly high point on his resume. He's never held elective office. I think he will emphasize that he, in his way, is an outsider, and that he can bring some consensus building to Washington, that he can work across the aisle. He'll challenge Republican John Bozeman, a person who doesn't have high unfavorable ratings, but doesn't have very high name recognition at all, really. He's been in Congress 15 years. I think that Eldridge will emphasize that Bozeman, nice man, just hasn't done very much, and that he can do more. He figures if he can convert just maybe a third or more of the independent voters who gave Mike Beebe his margins for governor, perhaps he could win the election. This might be a tall order in a heavily Republican state, but he'll start with about 40% of the vote. He only needs 10 more. We'll see if he can get it. He's going to give it a try, and it's good that they've got somebody to run. Mike Huckabee continues to get a lot of news, not all of it flattering, for his effort to commandeer Kim Davis's release from jail yesterday to his own political purposes. An embarrassing bit of film clip shows his aide elbowing Ted Cruz out of the way, who was also trying to horn in. Today, Mike Huckabee sounded like Leslie Gore crying that it was his party, and he should cry if he wants to about Ted Cruz trying to get in the way of it. I thought this was about Kim Davis, not about Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee's campaign is not doing very well. He's lagging in the polls, way behind in Iowa, now South Carolina too. This Kim Davis act is merely a stunt to reach out to evangelical voters. They're gullible, but maybe not that gullible. We shall see. A Little Rock man has filed a Freedom of Information Act request to get the state police records on why Boyce Hamlet, who's head of the ABC Enforcement Division, that's the Alcohol Beverage Control Enforcement Division, why he was fired as a state trooper about 15 years ago for lying to superiors. The Attorney General of Arkansas, a Republican like Hamlet is, has thrown in with him and said those records don't have to be released, so they normally are. She says there's no compelling interest. Ray Kopp's suit says there is a compelling interest in knowing about the credibility of a top law enforcement officer. Hard to argue with that. Today, the National Merit Scholarship Program released its list of semifinalists in its national scholarship competition. Little Rock Central High School once again topped all the high schools in the state with the most number of semifinalists, with 16. A nice story out of Jessieville, Arkansas. The football coach there suspended himself basically for the first football game of the year for failing to be on the scene quickly enough to stop a player from waving a rebel flag at a school pep rally. There's no rule against waving a rebel flag. This player was on suspension already for other matters. The coach just thinks in the current time it's just not a really good thing to do. Just because something's legal doesn't mean it's right. And he set an example, took one for the team by showing what the right kind of behavior is. I'd say a man of the week is Don Phillips, the coach at Jessieville High School. And finally, Jason Rapert, another day. He went on KTV last night to again try to explain how he made a threatening remark about being armed and not liking being harassed on a parking lot by somebody who asked him a political question. He essentially admitted in the interview that indeed his threatening remark was in response to nothing more than a question he didn't like from somebody on a political matter. He still continues to dodge the question of who exactly made this remark to him, although it's pretty clear it's probably the person who first called Jason Rapert out on Facebook. But this prompted me to ask the state police about Rapert's complaints that he's had many threats on Facebook and other places. Indeed, he's made untold numbers of complaints to the state police about what he perceived to be threats, but some of them were clearly just merely acts of political speech. People don't like what Jason Rapert does and told him so. He doesn't like people telling him that, but it doesn't constitute a threat. The state police says it can find no evidence of credible threats against Jason Rapert. He's not too happy that this information came out. The state police said, though they spent an incredible amount of money, time, and investigative muscle investigating all of Rapert's complaints, bringing in a behavior analyst, having an Iowa State trooper interview somebody, all subpoenaing phone records, that sort of thing, that it would do the same thing for anybody else. Don't know about that, but certainly Jason Rapert got special handling. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.